Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take your sources, could be articles, notes, research, and really dig in to find the key insights.
Think of it as your shortcut to getting up to speed. We sift through the material you're interested in.
And this particular deep dive continues our, well, pretty extensive series covering the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, the MPEP.
We're going section by section, aiming to make the USPTO's rules and procedures, a bit more accessible.
Today we're focusing on Chapter 1200, that's the Appeal chapter, and specifically MPP Section 1203. The title is Administrative Handling.
Right. And this section is, well, it's crucial because it outlines how the USPTO actually handles the paperwork and process for ex parte appeals.
So the admin side of things.
Exactly. Both before the case officially goes to the patent trial and appeal board, the PTT, and what happens after that handoff.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So our mission here is really to demystify this whole administrative flow. Who does what? When does the responsibility shift?
And what are the key requirements you need to watch out for? Basically giving you a map of that behind-the-scenes journey when you file an appeal.
Okay, so the whole appeal journey, it really kicks off when you file certain key documents.
Like the notice of appeal.
That's the main one to start.
Right.
Or maybe the appeal brief itself, which lays out your argument. Sometimes people file a pre-appeal brief request first, too.
Ah, got it. And where do these first documents actually land inside the USPTO system?
They initially go to the Patent Appeal Center, to the first stop.
Okay, the Patent Appeal Center.
But here's something important, and maybe a little surprising. Even though you filed appeal documents, the Patent Examining Corps, the examiners, they actually keep control over some really key decisions.
They do, even after the appeal is filed.
Yeah, before jurisdiction formally transfers to the PTT.
Uh-huh.
So the examiner is still the one looking at your appeal brief, writing the examiner's answer, and deciding if any amendments or evidence you filed late, like after the final rejection or even after the notice of appeal, are admissible. They have authority for certain procedural petitions related to that, too.
Interesting. So the examiner's role doesn't just stop dead when the notice is filed?
Not at all. Not until that formal jurisdiction shift.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the Patent Appeal Center as the first stop. What else do they do besides just, receiving the papers?
Well, they're also kind of the gatekeepers for formal requirements. They check if all the appeal documents you submitted actually meet the rules.
Like checking the boxes, basically.
Pretty much. Making sure everything's in order procedurally before it moves on.
And what happens if something's not right? If there's a mistake in the paperwork?
That can be a big deal. The MPP gives a really clear example. The appeal brief. If you don't file your appeal brief on time, the appeal is just dismissed. Done. MPP Section 1215 makes that very clear, missing that deadline. Usually that's the end of the road for that appeal.
Wow. Okay, so those formal checks are serious.
Definitely. And the Patent Appeal Center is the main place doing those checks.
So it's not the examiner who flags these kinds of formal problems?
Generally, no. The MPEP actually says examiners are not supposed to be the ones raising defects in the appeal documents themselves.
Huh. That seems a little counterintuitive.
It's about workflow, I think. The Appeal Center specializes in these procedural checks. Now, there's a small exception, like if a really serious issue slips through and is found later, the examiner might get consulted. But that's rare. Usually it's the Appeal Center's job.
Okay, so Appeal Center handles intake and formal checks. The examiner handles the substantive response, considers the brief, deals with some late filings, but then there's this handoff point.
Right. The point where jurisdiction, the actual authority over the case, transfers from the examining corps to the PTT.
And when exactly does that happen? What's the trigger?
It's very specific. Two possible triggers. Either one, you file your reply brief, that's your response to the examiner's answer.
Okay.
Or two, the deadline for filing that reply brief just expires, and you haven't filed one.
So the moment one of those things happens, bam, jurisdiction shifts.
Exactly. At that point, the case is officially out of the examiner's hands, jurisdiction-wise, and it belongs to the board.
And what happens then administratively? Does someone literally carry a file over?
Well, maybe not literally carry it, but yeah, the application is then forwarded to the PTA, and that appeal forwarding fee, if you had to pay it and it wasn't waived earlier, usually gets processed around this time too.
Right, the fee. Okay, so the case arrives at the PTA. What's their first step?
They start their own internal process called docketing.
Docketing. What does that entail?
It's basically getting the case formally logged into the PTE's system. They assign it a new appeal number specific to the board. They'll also send out a formal docketing notice letting you know, hey, your appeal is officially before the board now. and then they allocate the case. It might go on to a master list waiting for a judge panel, or sometimes right to a 3-judge panel.
But what if the PCT gets the case and finds a problem, something that maybe should have been sorted out earlier?
Good question. If the board finds issues that prevent them from properly docketing the case or moving forward, maybe something the examiner needs to clarify or address first, they can remand the appeal.
Remand, meaning send it back.
Send it back,
Yeesh.
right back to the examiner.
Even after jurisdiction supposedly transferred.
Yes, but it's a formal process. The board issues an order explaining why it's being remanded and what needs to be addressed. And you, the appellant, get notified that it's gone back to the examiner.
So it's not stuck in limbo, you know where it is.
Correct, you're kept in the loop. Now, what's fascinating here is there's this specific part in 1203 called special case.
Special case? Sounds intriguing.
It is. It deals with applications that got special status earlier in examination. Maybe they were expedited.
Ah, right. Like petitions to make special based on health or age or something.
Exactly. So the question is, does that special status carry over into the appeal?
And does it?
The rule is yes. If the application had special status before, it keeps it during the appeal. But there's a catch.
Always a catch.
You have to keep prosecuting diligently. You can't just sit back. You need to actively move the appeal along to maintain that special status.
Makes sense. Okay, but what if you didn't have special status before, and now, during the appeal, you realize you need it expedited? Can you ask for it then?
You can, but the process changes once the PTT has jurisdiction. Remember that handoff point?
After the reply brief stage.
Right. So after that point, if you want a petition to make the case special, you have to file that petition directly with the board, not the examiner, not the appeal center.
Directly to the PT. And is it easy to get?
Not necessarily. The standard is quite high. Your petition has to meet the same requirements, the same level of evidence, as a petition filed directly with the USPTO director under a different rule, 37 CFR 1.102.
So a pretty high bar then?
A very high bar. The MPP even gives an example, saying basically just filing a petition with the board after they have jurisdiction without a really strong justification and evidence meeting that standard. Well, it's probably not going to be enough. You really need to build a solid case for why it deserves special attention at the board level.
Got it. So plan ahead if you think you might need special status on appeal.
Definitely good advice. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, what this section 1203 really shows us is this interconnected system. You've got the Patent Appeal Center, the Examining Corps, and the PTAB all playing distinct roles.
Yeah, it's not just one entity handling the whole thing start to finish.
Not at all. It's sequential. The Appeal Center does the initial processing and formal checks. Then the examiner has their phase for substantive review and response. Then the PTAB takes over for the final review and decision.
Almost like a relay race. Each runner has their specific leg of the race.
That's a great analogy, actually. A relay race with specific rules for passing the baton, that baton being jurisdiction. And they all work together, following the procedures to keep the appeal moving towards, docketing and eventual resolution.
And for you, the listener, understanding these different roles, knowing who's responsible for what at each stage, and especially knowing when that authority shifts, that's really valuable, right?
Absolutely. It helps you navigate the whole process more effectively. You can anticipate the steps, understand potential delays maybe, know who to direct questions or filings to.
And be aware of those critical requirements, like the brief deadline or the high standard for getting special status later on. It helps manage expectations.
Precisely. Knowing the administrative map makes the journey less confusing.
So we've really dug into MPP Section 1203 today. We've broken down that administrative path an appeal takes from the moment you file, through the Patent Appeal Center's checks, the examiner's involvement, that crucial transfer to the PTT, their docketing, potential remands, and even how special status works on appeal.
It's a lot of moving parts, but hopefully clearer now.
So what does this all mean? Here's something to think about. Knowing these specific administrative checkpoints and hurdles like the Appeal Center's formal review or the difficulty of getting late special status, how might that influence the way you prepare your next appeal, maybe affect your strategy or timing?
Yeah, how does knowing the behind the scenes change your on-stage performance, so to speak?
We want to give a special thank you to Mike Shepard, the creative director who organized this entire audio series.
And just a reminder, this summary of the MPEP was generated using AI tools, including ChatGPT and NotebookLM, and it may contain errors or omissions.
It's provided for general educational and informational purposes only. It is absolutely not legal advice or a substitute for formal instruction. For authoritative guidance, please consult the official MPEP, a qualified instructor, or, of course, a registered patent practitioner.